So here I'm going to be talking about the integumentary system, and you'll remember that systems are a level of biological organization. So we have atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, and then systems. So the integumentary system is oftentimes not a system that we talk about very much, but it includes the skin as well as the glands in your skin. And it also includes your accessory organs that include the hair and your nails. So welcome to the integumentary system. So when we talk about the integumentary system, we can talk about the functions. So obviously, because this is the skin, one of the functions is that it is protective. It serves as a boundary, as a barrier. So we can say that it is a protective barrier. And this is a physical barrier, right? So we don't want things to get in through this. So having wounds, for example, can be bad because you could get an infection. But it is also there can be a chemical barrier. So for example, sweat actually contains chemicals that are antimicrobial, and sweat can also sometimes be acidic. And so that actually creates a barrier. So that would be like a chemical barrier. So we have a physical barrier, and we're going to talk about the epidermis, but we also have a chemical barrier. And this could be, for example, like lysozyme, which is an enzyme that breaks down bacteria. Lysozyme, it could also be antibodies. So that's part of our immune system that produce antibodies that are specific to a particular microbe. And then we could also talk about the acid, and sometimes this is referred to as your acid mantle. And so this is this idea that the acidity of your sweat is actually antimicrobial. We also can talk about it as being a biological barrier. So we do have some white blood cells that are in the skin that aid in protecting us. And so an example of this would be a special type of white blood cell called a dendritic cell. And these are actually cells that can eat other things like microbes, and they can present pieces of those microbes to your other immune cells so that your body can learn to recognize them. So these would be some examples of how your integumentary system is a protective barrier. We can also talk about how it functions in body temperature regulation. So for example, sweating is a mechanism by which we can get rid of excessive heat through evaporative cooling. So what this means is that when you are hot, your blood gets shunted to the surface of your skin, which is why, for example, your skin turns red when you're sweating. And then you sweat, and then the water evaporates off the surface of your skin, and that takes heat along with it. And so when you're cold, for example, those blood vessels shut down and blood is shunted away from the surface of your skin. So like when you're cold, you generally aren't like bright red and sweating, because that would be counter to regulating your body temperature. We also have what is referred to as subcutaneous sweat. Oh, excuse me, not sweat, subcutaneous, that would be interesting, subcutaneous fat. So this is under the outer layers of the skin, and this is the hypodermis. So this is under the dermal layer of the skin, which is connective tissue, and this consists of areolar connective tissue, but also adipose. So the adipose tissue, which is fat adipose tissue. So this adipose tissue, one of the things that it does is it stores triglycerides so that you can use that energy if you need to. If you run out of energy, you can use that stored fat. This is the fat that is underneath the skin, not the fat that is around your organs or in your body cavity, and because that is called visceral fat. So subcutaneous versus, for example, visceral fat, which is a different thing. It's in around your organs inside of your body cavity. So this adipose tissue stores triglycerides, but it also helps to regulate body temperature. Aquatic mammals have a lot of subcutaneous fat, so like whales and seals, and that is because they lose heat more readily to water than to air. And you know that if you've ever been in a 70-degree swimming pool versus like being 70 degrees outside in the air. And so this can be used and is really actually really important in regulating your body temperature. Okay. Another mechanism or another function of the integumentary system is cutaneous sensation. So located in our skin, we have specialized neurons. So for example, we can feel pain, right? So we have specialized neurons that are able to detect if your skin has become damaged. It's really important that we know when our skin is damaged so we can take precautions of, like, for example, preventing excessive blood loss, or maybe, cleaning the wound, right? It's kind of interesting because as we age, we might find that we have less pain reception in our skin. And so this is why, for example, old people sometimes get a cut, even I do, get a cut on my leg, for example, and I don't even feel it and I don't even realize it. And I'm like, later, I'm like, what is this, right? I didn't feel it. So cutaneous sensation and pain reception is an important function of the skin. We can also sense touch, and this could be light versus deep touch, deep pressure. And so this is important to know whether or not something is crawling over the surface of your skin, for example, right? And then also, it gives us information about our environment when we're touching something. One of the interesting things about our skin is that when we are in contact with water, right, our skin tends to get wrinkled on your fingertips and on your feet. And that has nothing to do with actual water moving in through the skin, because the skin is a barrier, right? It protects against water loss, but it actually helps us grip more. It helps the gripping of our hands and our feet when they are in water. They discovered that it is a neurological mechanism that actually causes that wrinkling of your fingertips and your feet when they are exposed to water, which helps us with touching underwater and grabbing underwater. Okay, so that is an example of a function of the integumentary system. We also have metabolism. So remember, metabolism is all of the chemical reactions in your body. One really important metabolic chemical reaction is taking cholesterol and converting it into vitamin D. Vitamin D is an essential nutrient that we need to obtain. We can produce it, but oftentimes this production doesn't happen because it requires sunlight. So in essence, it's actually an example of photosynthesis, not in terms of producing energy, but in terms of using light energy to synthesize vitamin D. And so oftentimes, especially if we don't go outside and expose our skin to UV radiation very oftenly, we could be deficient in vitamin D, and that could lead specifically in children to bone malformations like rickets, and that can be a problem. But it is also a problem because vitamin D is necessary for even adults, and so it is really an important nutrient that we need to consider. Okay, so the last one is excretion. And when we talk about excretion, we generally think of the urinary system. We think of the kidneys. And one of the major functions of the kidneys is to get rid of nitrogenous wastes in the form of urea. So urea is a nitrogenous waste. Which means that it has nitrogen in it. And it is also found in sweat. So small amounts found in sweat. And so, for example, when you have sweaty clothes from working out and you leave them in a pile, after a while, microorganisms that are present in the environment are going to break down that urea and they're going to produce ammonia. And so ammonia is the smelly stink that you sometimes get with sweaty clothes, right? And so sometimes you have to add things to your laundry, like maybe vinegar, for example, to get rid of that smell. And so that is the reason for why sometimes sweat smells like ammonia, is because of the presence of urea. So urea is what is in our urine. And if urine sits for a long time, right, after we have urinated, then it will also start to smell like ammonia. So here you have some of the interesting functions of the integumentary system.